Hi, this is Sean Burgoyne, and you're listening to AFL Exchange with Riley, Cal and Mitch. Let's get into it.
Hello and welcome to AFL Exchange, another big week of footy. It's going to be a big week for that man who just did the intro, Sean Burgoyne, joining an illustrious club of 400 gamers this week, a club that features one of our favourites here on AFL Exchange, Dustin Fletcher.
I really pronounced Cal as well from Sean Burgoyne in the opener.
We used to work together at the AFL.
Oh,
when he was,
did you?
Yeah, when he was working a little bit more with the Football League upstairs in an official role. Haven't seen him around the office too much over the last 2 years. Must say I haven't been in too much over the last 2 years. But yeah, we used to cross paths a bit.
It's going to be a massive episode. I'm, of course, Riley Beveridge, joined by Cal Twomey and Mitch Cleary. But I'll tell you what else is going to be massive. Ooh. Late July, our live show at the Jam Factory. Tickets on sale now. You can buy them through Ticketmaster. This is going to be massive, boys.
It is, and the links are on our Instagram and our Twitter pages. You can find them at AFL Exchange. Cal, the tickets are running hot off the press at the moment.
Flying out the door. Absolutely flying out the door. We might have to do a second show at this rate. But so get in for the first one because it's going to be fantastic. I'm looking forward to it. Saturday morning, get your weekend started off right. Might have a couple of special guests. You never know. There's also some special prizes that are going to be up for grabs too. So we've been great friends, and we've had great friends for a long time now at Lazy Mo's, a restaurant chain throughout Victoria. And if you attend our live show in July, you are in the running to win one of 10, or there's 10 up for grabs, 10 $100 vouchers to Lazy Mo's. You can go and take them to anywhere, any store in Victoria. So they've been very kind to give us a bit of help there. The team, Frank Bianco, the team at the Oakley Lazy Mo's, obviously the father of Trent Bianco. We've been there.
Frank is a premiership team manager for the Oakley Chargers in the NAB League.
Yeah, the whiteboard is still up there.
Yep.
He assured me the other day that it's still up there in the restaurant. And
Going to the Oakley one because it's something to behold.
Yep.
And you
premiership
might
jumper.
And like us, you might get Trent to serve you. I think I had a HSP Palmer that night.
So this is what happens when Trent Bianco signs a fresh contract extension. The Biancos start to get nice and giving with their time and their supplies.
They've always been very giving with their
They
time.
have. So you get a chance to win one of 10 vouchers out there for that one. So get to the live show for that. And there will be some other good prizes up for grabs as well.
It's an awesome place as well, the Oakley one in particular, because you do get to see that famous. One day it will be a very famous Oakley Chargers premiership jumper signed by the boys. Matt Rowell, Noah Anderson, Trent Bianco, of course. A lot of names in that Oakley team, wasn't there, Kel?
There were.
So you can find that. We've got all of the details.
I'm just a little bit distracted. I'm watching the spelling bee up above us on ESPN.
You didn't need to cut that out, Kel.
And just wondering where we can take that from an exchange point of view. So,
how do you spell Switkowski?
SWITKOWSKI.
That's good.
That's right. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah.
SAM.
That is very good. But as we said, Twitter and Facebook, AFL Exchange, that's where you can find the details for our live show, late July, July 31, in fact, this Saturday morning. We'll get kicked off today, Cal, with the Tigers. Another loss on the weekend. They're just clinging to that spot in the 8. Are you ready to write them off just yet?
Yes.
Ooh.
2 weeks ago I wasn't. I think over the last 2 weeks, though, the tipping point has come for this side this year. I'm not ready to write off the dynasty, though. I just don't think they're going to win the premiership this year. I can't see them winning it from outside the top 4. They're going to have to do it from outside the top 4 because they're not making the top 4 this season. Their injuries have been significant. The cost of them has been significant. They're really missing Toby Nankervis. The impact of his absence in the past few weeks has been really obvious for all to see, and never more obvious or clear than on the weekend where Rowan Marshall and Paddy Ryder really did run amok. They lose Nathan Broad for a significant time. Noah Bolter might not play again this season. Tom Lynch might come back this week. David Asprey as well. And it's an easy kill against the Suns. But they're 3 wins off 5th. And I can't see this team stringing together 4 wins in the final series.
I'm not ready to write them off just yet, only because of the form they've had. The only concern I've got is the MCG form. They've lost 4 games now at the G, and that's been so un-Richmond-like in recent seasons. But when it comes to Noah Bolter on the weekend, Nathan Broad, I was in the camp of Alex Rance goes down a couple of seasons ago ready to write them off, but they do have the cattle to replace them. As you wrote today, David Asprey, close to a return. They've still got Dylan Grimes there. I might need one more performance like that until I'm putting a line through Richmond, just because of the credits they've got in the bank.
1-6 against top 8 teams this year, as you wrote a couple of weeks ago, Cal. That worries me going into the finals. But did Damien Hardwick, the reason why I'm not ready to write them off for the flag just yet is because did Damien Hardwick flag this a couple of weeks ago when he said that this is the year that a side outside the top 4 would be a better chance to win the premiership? Maybe he knew then that, I'm not saying that's the reason why he said it, but maybe he's priming his players that you peak in September.
Well, clearly, yeah. They were clearly at that point going to struggle to make the top 4, so it's a bit of self-conditioning, isn't it?
But that was a month ago, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, but the signs were pretty clear, weren't they?
They've turned it around before. They
have turned around
before. They
before.
were 7-6 in 2019, and they easily made the top 4, and they were 7-6 this year.
There's 5 teams better than them, though, this year. They might still come back and win it next year. They might still win it this year. I could be wrong, but I don't think they're playing at the sort of level, and I don't think they can turn it around this time around.
The fifth year has often proven the hardest, hasn't it? So go back to Hawthorn out in straight sets. The year they were going for the 4-peat. Brisbane had a quick decline off the back of theirs. Geelong was the one. They came back under a fresh coach, Chris Scott, a bit of renewed fight after that big loss in 2010. They won it in 2011. But the fifth year has often proven difficult for teams. I'm just not ready to write off Richmond just yet. Next question, Riles. And this, just speaking on the 8th spot, the Giants had the perfect opportunity to go into 8th on the weekend and blundered it.
And so did the Bombers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're playing Melbourne, but yeah. Next one, Riles. Dockers had a win over the Pies. Are they the best chance of upsetting the top 8?
Yes. At the moment on form, I was really impressed with what they did last week. What I would say, though, in relation to Fremantle, is they've just got an incredibly difficult run home from here. So 4 of their last 8 games. Reading my notes wrong here. 5 of their last 8 games are against top 8 sides.
Yeah.
You can look at this in 2 ways. I reckon you can look at it and say that makes it harder for them. They probably shouldn't be the side that's most likely to jump into the top 8. Or you can look at it and say, what a great opportunity for the Dockers. If they want to play finals, prove it against finals teams. I mean, this is where we'll see if Fremantle really is the side that a lot of people want them to be. 5 of the last 8 against top 8 sides. 4 of those 5 games are at Optus Stadium, though. So a great opportunity to get good sides on their home deck and a great opportunity to beat them. This is it for Fremantle now. They write their own destiny from here, I think.
Could it depend on what happens with the COVID-19 impact on the fixture?
Yeah, I know. That's the
starting this weekend.
So much of the unknown.
Yeah, particularly for them, for a side that hasn't been able to travel well, historically for a number of years now. And starting this weekend against Carlton, I mean, you'd back them in over there, I think. At 5 potentially back as well.
Yeah.
And if the game's transferred or changed or moved, we don't know where that one sits as we record this on Monday night. But if it is, the swing of how you look at that game and who comes in favourites and what the confidence that Carlton can take from Sunday's performance and win over Adelaide could be as well, it's really difficult to tell. So I think they're the best chance, the Dockers. I mean, I think they're pretty much the only chance. The Giants really missed their opportunity on Sunday against a side that they should beat. They just should beat them.
Yeah.
The Hawks. And the Bombers, well,
that was a massive loss.
I'm not sure Essendon was ever really in the finals mix. I think they've exceeded expectations regardless of how this season goes. And particularly even on the weekend, I thought they exceeded expectations to some degree. So, yeah, they haven't beaten the top sides, but did anyone really expect them to?
No, and I've got that down here. So I think the Fremantle have won the games they've needed to this year. Coming in, GWS, Hawthorn, Sydney at home, Adelaide and Collingwood on the road. They've won those games. Probably the Carlton game at Marvel Stadium was the one, in hindsight, they probably should have won at the time. Fremantle, I know Carlton were going okay at that point, but Fremantle probably should have won that in hindsight. They've got to win the next 2, Carlton at home and then Hawthorn on the road. If they're not winning either of those 2, put a line through Freo for the top 8. As for the current top 8 teams, we've just spoken about Richmond, but Sydney are no certainties either. They've got to play GWS in a few weeks coming up. We're still waiting to see where that game will be played given Sydney's current COVID situation. But I'm still not putting any hopes on definitely Sydney making the top 8. Just on the Dockers as well. Alex Pearce and Griffin Logue playing their first game together ever on the weekend. Just shows how struck those 2 have been by injuries.
Griffin Logue was 2016 draft.
Yeah.
So he's been there nearly 5 years. Amazing. Speaking of contracts, Mitch, which uncontracted Pies will and won't get a deal for next year? Because there's a number of guys who, in that Collingwood lineup, who are fighting for their footy futures.
Yes, so Levi Greenwood's retirement today leaves him at 13 out of contract. Trent Bianco re-signed last week. I think John Noble should get an extension of his current form, probably a couple of seasons. The biggest intrigue is around Mason Cox. So we saw Robert Harvey recall him for the first time on the weekend since round 4. Clearly shows he's a massive fan of him. And there's not many players that can single-handedly say they're four-peat stoppers like Mason Cox in the competition. But
I was going to say,
spare me.
Robert Harvey's first move is to bring back Mason Cox.
Yeah.
Bucks spoke to you about your coaching decisions. I wonder if you had a quiet word to the two-time Brownlow medalist.
Banger.
The puppet master at Collingwood.
Well, I was in the press conference and did ask him about it, and might have given him a bit of thought heading into. He did have match committee about an hour after that press conference.
Imagine if Robert Harvey goes into match committee and goes, right, boys, my first one. Mitch Cleary's just told me maybe we should be picking Mason Cox.
Can I just say, having spent an hour in Port Adelaide's match committee earlier this year, that would be the best thing ever. If Ken Hinkley at that point had walked in and said, look, I've just been asked a press conference question just by one of the guys from the Advertiser, and I'm going to change what I'm doing.
I forgot that bloke was on our list.
So Mason Cox, 30 out of contracts. He hit the trigger last year, but on that money at the time, I really question whether Collingwood, I know they'll never come out and say it, whether they actually wanted to keep him at the time. Josh Thomas out, Jack Madgen, Braden Sire. Bucks has shown good faith in Thomas and Madgen in particular. I think there's a question to come on those guys. And then Chris Mayne, whether he actually goes on at all, given his age.
What happens with Sire?
I think they might go with him just for another year at least. He's had a pretty unlucky run with injuries.
Not too many stranger 28-game careers, is there?
Yeah.
You've played a part in that, Clears. Has he recovered since fill-in?
I wasn't the one that went on the basketball court while I had a calf injury and played, and then when asked about it, said I didn't play.
Yeah, it's an interesting one.
I'm not sure if Mason Cox has a club out there beyond Collingwood. I mean, there's a dearth of talls, and it's really hard to find them, and we'll get to that later in the show as well. It's difficult. There's the ruck merry-go-round that happens every year, and he presents as a ruck forward option, so there's maybe some versatility that can come with him, but yeah, I don't know if another club would, if he does fall out of favour at the Pies.
All right. It's one of our favourite times of the week where we crown our next NAB AFL Rising Star nominee. It's a very loud drum roll this week. Oh. And for round 15, Super Dev Robertson. Cal, talk to us about the young lion.
He's a gun. Pick 22 in the draft a couple of years ago. Pretty infamous type of story now, isn't it? The Devon Robinson draft story. Brisbane moved up to grab in the 2019 draft. The second day trade period that opened. Obviously, he was overlooked on the opening night, having arrived at the draft on draft night, having gone to that first night of the draft and thought that he was going to get picked in that sort of 14 to 20 bracket. He probably thought he was going to go pick a couple of picks earlier. It didn't happen. Melbourne was keen as well on him. They were obviously trying to trade up the board. They ended up with Trent Rivers, so not too bad there. But yeah, Robertson's been fantastic, I think. A midfielder with real class around the stoppages with his hands and ability to find the footy. He's built for the level, I think, and always was. I think clubs probably missed a trick with letting him through the teens.
Interesting hearing Chris Fagan speak last week. It was sort of down to Reece Matheson and Devon Robertson for that last spot, but he's gone 16 touches on the weekend against Geelong. Probably played better than that as well. It felt like a more important game than 16 touches, and it feels like Matheson, Tom Berry and Devon Robertson are probably fighting for one spot, maybe two in that side, and Devon Robertson's got it at the moment. Given the opportunity with Lachie Neal out of the team, he's grabbed it both hands.
He's awesome. Strange draft night for him. Probably a really disappointing draft night for him, but Brisbane took the punt the next day. He was almost the big story going into that second day, wasn't he, Cal? And gets to a good side that's nurtured him quite well over the last couple of years.
Well, there was that benefit, and it'll be back this year with the AFL bringing back the two-night NAB AFL draft, where if you have the first pick of the second round and the hangover of the night before, clubs get a whole night to sleep on how much they like the players that are left, and all of a sudden you have a really prized possession in your hands. So that one went against the Crows last year with it being brought back to a one-night draft.
So currently Gold Coast it's up in the air as to whether they have that first pick of the second round.
Well, I mean, their performances this year would suggest that they probably end up with that pick. But I know what you're getting at. That the AFL hasn't completely locked in that they do have that pick, a pick that was part of their compensation package a couple of years ago that also netted them Matt Rowell, obviously, and academy concessions. They also have the start of the second round pick for this year's draft, but that hasn't officially been ticked off. I'd imagine, though, that given their form, they'll end up with it.
Adelaide showed a couple of years ago how important it is in picks on the first pick of the second night, how valuable it is and what you can turn it into, having the best part of 24 hours to go to the trade table with it. Rolls, Melbourne's forward line, really intriguing at the moment. What does it look like, their best forward setup?
It's difficult, isn't it? Because I'd have said the one they used on Saturday night for the first 6 weeks of the season was clearly their best, with Tom McDonald as that lead-up target, Bailey Fritsch moving higher up the field, marking and stuff like that. But on Saturday night, they had 56 inside 50s for 9 goals. And when Tom McDonald and Bailey Fritsch aren't getting their hands on the footy, they don't offer much else, which is really strange. I think you'd like to see one more of the Wiedemann-Brown debate go into that forward line, but which one's another question. Ben Brown kicked 5 on the weekend in the VFL. Sam Wiedemann played a lot through the ruck, kicked 1 goal, 3, so missed some opportunities, but had 21 touches and 11 marks as well. So which one you go for? In my personal view, I think Sam Wiedemann, you have to go back to him when it's important. But if you don't play Ben Brown this week, when do you play him? He's kicked 5 goals on the weekend. You've got every reason and every excuse to pick him this week. You almost have to get 6 weeks under his belt to see if he's the man that can help spearhead that Melbourne finals push. So if you don't pick him this weekend, I'm not sure when you do, even though I kind of think Sam Wiedemann is the one most likely to be fit and firing come September.
I think it's Ben Brown time, definitely. Has to be. Kicked their 2 lowest scores of the season the past 2 weeks. Obviously, defensively, they're fantastic, and we've seen that again with Stephen May, who's awarded best on-ground votes via the coaches. He was terrific. Essendon had no answer for him on Saturday night. Jake Lever was really good as well. I think it's time for Ben Brown, and he's coming in with confidence. He's playing a different level than we saw earlier this year. He's got the fitness up to the point where he can lead up and down the ground. He goes on those searching leads for 67, 70 metres, turns around and does it again. Who's it at the expense of? Probably Tom Sparrow, I think. They probably have to change around their structure to some degree, and he's been pretty good, Sparrow, I think, and he looks comfortable in there, and yeah, he'd be unlucky, but I think they need him in there, Ben Brown, and I think this is the time to bring him in.
Yeah, especially with Jack Viney coming in, someone like a Sparrow will have to fall out for that spot. I'm with you. I think Sam Wiedemann looked shot with confidence, was given a fair run at it with Ben Brown out of that side, even playing them together, but unfortunately, I think it's time for Ben Brown now, and you bring him in on a 4-year contract. You've got to give him a chance to see what he can prove, especially off the last couple of weeks.
Might be the perfect time as well. This is a side that's not, it wants to remain at the top of the ladder, but it's not fighting for a top 2 or 3 position right here, right now. Yeah. It might have a level of comfortability about coming into a side that's pretty confident.
Agree. You are listening to AFL Exchange. Cal, got this one in from one of our colleagues at AFL Media, Paul Baston, who wants to know, what game did you and your mates leave early?
I don't have any mates.
Thanks. What are we?
Colleagues. I leave plenty of games early. I leave early all the time.
Was there a memorable one?
I've watched my team check out of games early for the best part of 2 decades. So,
so you're a booer and you're a leave earlier.
We'll get to that as well. There's no reason
Sums
I
you
can't.
up.
Anzac Day 20.
Not the Zaharakis one.
Yeah.
You didn't, did you? No, you didn't.
No, listen though. I have told this story before, but we've got a whole new breed of listeners. We've quadrupled our listenership this season. So I left early to go down to the rooms to interview Dustin Fletcher because it was his 300th game the next week, and I heard the roar of the Zaharakis goal when I was on the way down. So actually, I missed it, but I was there. I wasn't leaving early to get the train home. I was just leaving early to make sure I was in prime position to grab Fletch. And yeah, I did speak to Fletch, and it was actually sort of funny. You think about how...
Did he ask you any questions?
How naive I was at the time. That's 12 years ago. Maybe the system has changed, Mitch, but at that point, I was doing a story for the Footy Record. The next week was Dustin Fletcher's 300, so I'd speak to him at that point. Essendon wasn't able to facilitate an interview with Fletch in the lead-up, unfortunately, and that's the only place I could get him. And then I thought, oh, well, there's Matthew Knights walking around. I'll just grab him in the middle of the change rooms. They just come off this great win. So I just said, Have you got 5 minutes? So I just grabbed him for 5 minutes. Like, there is no chance in the world that would happen these days. None.
Even before COVID.
No, exactly right. Club media managers.
Shout out to all those listening. I left the 2004.
You do too.
2004 Wizard Home Loans Cup Grand Final early, Geelong St Kilda, more than 50,000 at Marvel at the time. Cats led at three-quarter time. I'm just looking at that game today.
So why'd you leave?
Brent Guerra 4, Kingsley 5. No, I left early, but I can't remember a game I've actually left for for no reason in the last quarter of a game with 4 points on the line, unlike you.
No, there's no. Well, they've not been on the line. They've been done. They've been handed out. They've been taken home.
No, but you got to go there. If you go in there to support your team, you've got to stay and
No,
see
you don't.
it out.
The players don't see it out often.
I agree with Cal on that one.
I did leave the Geelong West Coast 2006 game when Geelong led by 54 points. Had to go to a birthday party when I was about 12, 13.
I've been a ripper. What, local Maccas?
Probably 10-pin bowling or something. And the Cats got rolled that day.
Lammies.
They got rolled.
They got rolled. 54 points they led by.
I'm going to bring it back to OG AFL Exchange days with this reference. I left the right in front of me game early
Oh.
before Jack Anthony became the hero. It was not right in front of me because I didn't see it.
I remember watching that game with all the Melbourne Storm players at a pub. And they were about 2 weeks away from winning a premiership.
That's random. Paul actually sent that question in because his mates left the Grundy game. The Is It Grundy game.
Oh,
Geelong,
'cause they were no
Collingwood,
chance.
Richmond.
No
Yeah.
chance
Which I think
there.
now is renowned as the Mitch TikTok game.
Yes.
And he's good. Mine was if from memory serves, was a dad-led decision. I think we'd parked inside the MCG on that day, and Dad forced us to leave to beat the traffic. Shout out to Dad.
Mr. Beveridge does listen.
All right, we'll get to our favourite segment. Hang on a second. Mitcho.
Hang on a second, Alistair Clarkson. This is from round one post-game.
I guess that's their job.
Oh, listen, I've said enough about the sub. Gone down here, get his chance. He's a great young kid, and even though he didn't get on the ground today, he'll get an enormous amount of benefit out of going through the whole experience today.
Connor Downey didn't play a single minute in his AFL debut. Still hasn't played yet. 14 games later, yet to get on the AFL ground. Is he going to play this year? It's looking unlikely given he's...
Got a lot out of it, though.
Hawthorn need to play him, I think.
Leo Connolly.
Yeah.
Friday night was an interesting debut, wasn't he?
Yep.
Come in as the very, very late replacement for Jack Billings, was the sub, and then came on and did actually okay.
Yeah.
Hang on a second. Luke Hodge. What was this?
I guess that's their job, just making sure there's no soft drops.
Soft drop. Oh, hang on. Hang on a second, Hodgie. That's a copyright claim. Nearly fell off my couch on Friday night when he dropped a soft drop. It's
What
good to
was the
see it spreading,
context?
though. In the context of how we use it.
Yeah, it might have been Jack Billings.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Also, Hoas, to the people criticising supporters for booing too loudly at umpiring decisions, these are the same people that 3 weeks ago were saying footy's nothing without supporters, then nothing without crowds. Where are the supporters? You want crowds, but you want them on your terms. To boo is to be. And just hang on a second. You can't have it both ways.
It's an unreal comment. To boo is to be.
It's part of the theatre of the game. And before anyone gets involved, the Adam Good situation was a very different case. I'm not advocating for that at all. This
What
is part of it.
about the Tasmanian Premier asking for the Tassie fans to boo Tony Cochrane?
What about Tony Cochrane's kit on the weekend?
The camo cap.
It's part of the fun, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great.
That was extraordinary.
He knocked him back for the goal kicking comp.
Yes. Apparently he's not a footballer.
No.
More of a... Well, he hangs out with Big Jagger.
My host, some of the accolades in the game are going completely under the radar. All everyone wants to talk about is, Lance Franklin, 8-time All-Australian, Dustin Martin, the only player in the game's history to be a 3-time Norm Smith medalist. What about our man Cal Twomey, who is now a 3-time Ian Stewart medalist voter?
That's extraordinary.
I think 3.
That'll be a big chapter in your autobiography.
Do you go to our editors and ask, who do our rosters and ask, can I be on the Richmond St Kilda game this year, please? That's my one request for the forget grand final day.
Do you get the late call up for? I don't think it was late call up. I got the call up for the Ian Stewart medal voting on Friday night, courtesy of Claire White and St Kilda media team.
When did you get the call?
Before you, obviously.
Mitch is trying to figure
Are
it out.
you trying to check out if you asked before?
No.
I was?
No, I just
Riley, do you reckon that's what he was doing?
Controversy coming.
No,
then.
not at all. I was never rostered on for that game. I was just curious because I've been approached for a few of these, and they usually come a bit earlier in the week. So I'm wondering if you're a late caller.
You're the Leo Connolly of Ian Stewart medalists.
Well, I mean, after the controversy of the Showdown medal, maybe I didn't think I'd get another gig. I think these ones stacked up pretty well, though, to be fair.
No one criticised your voting this week.
Misty's lookalike.
Well, yeah.
Could have got votes.
I gave Luke Dunstan 3, Jack Steele 2, and Jack Sinclair 1. And the coaches' votes, not that they're always right, but on this occasion they were. Luke Dunstan went 10.
You should have really tarnished your reputation and voted for Jack Billings.
Donna Lee Matthews.
That's good.
Oh, or some rising star votes.
You should be, just before we go, have they ever asked you to vote on the Rising Star at season's end?
No, but in all seriousness, they should.
Cal, for those that are listening, Cal said that with a straight face.
We didn't even set that up, too.
Oh, that's good. And probably fair.
Question for you, Mitch. Which club faces the most defining trade period later this year?
There's a stack of them. Collingwood, to see what they do to match the points for Nick Dacos. What are they going to do? How are they going to find those points? Do players have to go out? Graham Wright spoke a couple of weeks ago about the hangover salary cap wise. What does that look like? Does someone have to make way? Fascinated to see what happens with Collingwood. And as you've mentioned a couple of times, Essendon, do they go down the continual path of the draft? It's worked. Or do they use the pick that they get, most likely top 10 pick if they miss the finals this year, and go and use it at the trade table?
It's interesting. Another interesting club that finds itself in a similar boat is Sydney.
Yeah.
Does Sydney go to the draft one more year, or do they think, actually, let's fast track it a little bit, let's go after some established talent now, providing they have the cap situation that enables them to do that? I'm interested to see how St Kilda and Carlton responds to disappointing seasons at the trade table, whether or not they stick with their current strategy or flip it a little bit. And Richmond and West Coast, another in a really interesting position. Probably went into this year thinking top 4 chance, probably not going to get there now. Do they still see themselves in that premiership window?
Well, Richmond has 3 picks inside the 4 picks inside the top 30. So it's a good hand at least. And you can go into the trade period and at this point have a feel for what your plan's going to be. But until you really know who's going to put up their hand and say, I want out, or on the other hand, say, I want to come, then you don't really know. But the Tigers in that case as well, would they go after Adam Chera, and would plans be shelved from other clubs as well if Chera says, okay, I'm coming home, let's see what we can do here. I'm open to opportunities and don't really have a specific club that I'd go to. Not that I'd see him doing that in terms of not coming home without a destination firmly in mind. I'm with you, Rolls. I'm interested to see where St Kilda and Carlton go. They're fascinating case studies for me. Do they buckle up for more deals or back away from the trade and free agency space and hit the draft? Because, yeah, I mean, the Bombers, as you mentioned, Mitch, yeah, you can turn the complexion of a footy club really quickly with a really good draft. And they've done that. And Harrison Jones was, I guess, the leftover from the 2019 draft as well. He's sort of grouped together with this 2020 crop as well now because we didn't see him at all in his debut year. But yeah, it's going to be fascinating. Just a little one for me as well. What happens with Gold Coast from a trade perspective? Because I think looking at the ladder, they're a chance to end up with pick 1. They're a chance to finish last. They're 6 points ahead of North Melbourne at the moment. North's winning another game, at least, the way they're playing. I'm not sure Gold Coast is winning another game at the moment. Now, I'm a believer in Gold Coast. I'm a believer in the talent there. The way they're playing at the moment, they're making it really hard to be a believer of what they're doing. And yeah, they're a game and a half ahead of North Melbourne, but it's hard to see where their next win comes. And at that point, if you hold pick 1 in this draft, do you all of a sudden become a lot more, a destination for other clubs to say, well, hang on, we might be able to push out one of our players here and talk them into a move and try and get pick one out of the Suns.
I think you can do that, especially if, and you've written about this a number of times, if you love Jason Horn. Because in reality, he's going to be regardless of what pick he actually goes, whether it's 1, 2 or 3, he's probably going to be the only available one on the open market, isn't he?
That's where does Adelaide, with its first pick, go to the Suns and say, we'll give you pick whatever it is now, 4 or 5, or wherever it ends up about that point, and our future first as well, because we love this local kid.
And depending on how Gold Coast sees the draft, pick 1 for them might actually be pick 3.
Yeah. The other thing as well is like to them, and again, maybe it's not the pick of swaps or swap of picks for them. It's maybe more player based.
Well, they showed it with Lockie Weller, didn't they?
Because picks to them at this point, they've got Elijah Hollins, who's potentially one of the most talented players of last year's draft, who we haven't seen yet. He's just coming back through the VFL from his knee injury. So, there's all these different elements to what they do. They're going to be really interesting.
I'm more of a believer than a believer in Gold Coast at the moment. I'm gonna have to weigh up my membership for next year.
What do you mean? Is it too late now to say sorry?
Got one more for us.
I'm a loyal guy, but I might have to. They've got to show me a bit in these last 8 weeks for the membership for next year.
I'm waiting for one more from Cal.
I was trying, how do I put baby into something?
You are listening to AFL Exchange. Mitcho, a lot happening with the changing border situations across the country in the wake of the latest COVID-19 situations. What's some of the left field factors clubs will have to consider?
Well, I was thinking about the Josh Kelly situation. He's in Melbourne for 3 or 4 weeks longer than he would have been anticipating, as well as the Victorian clubs would have been anticipating with Josh. So I'm just thinking whether he gets the opportunity to sit down with some suitors and really thrash out this idea of leaving the Giants properly over the next month. Players have always spoken about the want to meet with their prospective suitors rather than Zoom or phone calls and those sort of things. So I know if a little cafe or a private office building gets hit up over the next 3 or 4 weeks and Josh Kelly gets a chance to sit down with some of these clubs, because if I'm...
On the grind, maybe?
Maybe. If I'm one of these clubs, I'm getting in Josh's ear while he's here. Or does a club get the chance now to see a Jake Riccardi? The Giants look like they might play a few more VFL games here if everything goes to plan over the next couple of weeks. He's kicking goals and goals for the Giants. Can't get a game even with Jesse Hogan out of that Giants team. So does that give recruiters who are predominantly Melbourne-based more of a chance to look at a Jake Riccardi? So these are some of the things I'm looking at when the Giants and Swans are spending a bit more time here.
What about the reverse? I'll give you the reverse to that. I saw Tom Papley yesterday out at Werribee watching...
a frosty reception?
No, love Tom. Did have a good chat. We're on great terms. And he was out watching his...
Just a recent thing?
Been great for years, mate. I don't know what you're talking about. We've discussed this so many times, and you need to pull your head in because you know that we're fine.
No. He tweets you and stuff. You're good.
He does.
The bigger question, Mitch, are you and Tom fine after the Dan Andrews sledge last year?
Yeah, you should have told me he's at Werribee. I would have made a beeline.
So he was out watching his brother Will play for Vic Country's under-19 team, and he had a really good last quarter. Actually, Will set up the goal that helped his side win. So he's not in the place now, Tom Papley, where he was a few years ago and wanted to come home. But does the time for being in Melbourne for Victorian players offset the time that they're usually away? Could the time, and if it does stretch out to be a month, hopefully it's not that long, but if it does stretch out to be a month, is that enough for these guys who are Victorian born and based predominantly for these younger players to get their fix, for instance? And then you go into an off season, you get another 2 months potentially at home, and you think, well, I've just spent a quarter of the year in my home town where I was born. Is that enough?
Good point.
The other thing, just from a offshoot of being in Victoria as well, I mean, getting the opportunity to dispel some horror shows from the past in terms of playing at venues, and that might be the case for different clubs around the country over the coming weeks.
West Coast at GMHBA Stadium.
They've been hammered. Lost their last 7. Swans have won 3 of their last 4 there.
So that is interesting. Anyway, it's our next segment.
My headphones are really loud tonight.
Cal, the thing that should happen is you turn your headphones down because you look like you've seen a ghost every time.
I don't know which nozzle to...
All right, TTSH. Mitcho?
Gil McLaughlin needs to work out where he's parking. That's what he needs to do on a Monday. I saw the vision on the news just before. He's walking out of Hobber, probably the second best local restaurant in Melbourne behind Lazy Mo's, today in Paran. Awesome establishment. And he's been ambushed by the journos who are waiting at the scan centre across the road. I don't know what he's thinking there with COVID and everything. Maybe he wanted a bit of camera time, Gil, potentially. And the other one I've got, you hear about players reaching out to ex-greats. Jesse Hogan on the phone to Wayne Carey.
Yep.
Kane suggests on the weekend that Luke Davies-Uniacke should get on the phone to Christian Petrarca.
I see that, yeah.
Tom Green needs to get on the phone to Dustin Fletcher and work out these Twitter followers. Dustin Fletcher's been retired for how long?
5 years.
He's got 3,000 followers, grown that since he's been out of the game. Tom is 968. He's limping to 1,000. Needs to get on the phone and work out how he's going to get to the four figures.
Fletch literally has like 375 more games up his sleeve, though. And 20 more years worth of...
Yeah, but he's retired.
Is this because he didn't answer your call
Forget about
today?
retired players. Yeah. It is. Fish has got a bee in his bonnet about that.
We've still got 8 minutes to the end of the show.
Can we confirm that today?
I did call Dustin Fletcher.
And did he answer?
No.
Did you leave a message as well?
Text him.
Has he responded?
Never leave voicemails because no one returns voicemails in 2021. But
You'd
he's
be
probably busy tennis
you'd be
coaching.
surprised.
Busy day on the tennis courts.
Things that should happen. The Western Bulldogs should go after David Asprey.
Oh.
So he's a 3-time premiership player, turned 30 this year, an unrestricted free agent, about to play his 150th game for the Tigers when he does get back, either 149th this week when he plays and 150th the week after. Why not tempt him across to the kennel for a couple of years as a key defender? Why not do that? That's clearly the missing piece of this Bulldogs lineup and structure when we look at their premiership credentials year in, year out.
But is it?
Yes.
The West Coast have got one of the most powerful forward lines. And what do they kick on the weekend?
Stephen May, I'll put it this way. Stephen May was in the Bulldogs side.
Yeah.
I know he costs $800,000, but if he was in the Bulldogs side, they'd be impenetrable. There'd be nothing getting in the way of them winning 2 or 3 flags. So if not him, the Dogs should be getting out and pulling out their depth charts around the competition. I'm sure Sam Power's doing that already and finding out which key defender is worth a first-round pick because you don't have to give anything up for David Asprey as an unrestricted free agent, but their first pick now is on the table for anyone who wants to come and take it at a good price because the Sam Darcy factor also affords them, as a father-son pick who they know is going to attract a bid in the first couple of picks, it affords them the opportunity to offload that pick in the trade period. So is it Alex Pearce, a pre-agent? Do you throw that pick up? Injury issues at Fremantle. Would you give it up for him and would Freo consider it? Probably not because they need their tools, but make him think. Robbie Tarrant, different one. You wouldn't offer your first-round pick for him, but as a unrestricted free agent as well, someone for experience. So that's what the Dogs should be doing with their off-season.
I like it. I like it a lot. I had a question on Sam Darcy that I was going to ask you. I might actually hold it for next week's show because it's a good one, I think. Things that should happen. We should stop trying to crown premiership favourites. So the last 3 weeks, it was the Western Bulldogs, then they lost to Melbourne. It was Melbourne, then they lost to Collingwood. It was Geelong, then lost to Brisbane. And then I tuned in this morning to, I think it was Access All Areas, and Matthew Lloyd's there saying that Brisbane's now the premiership favourites because they beat Geelong. And Brisbane's going to, I don't know, who are Brisbane playing this week? They're going to lose to them, inevitably, now.
They're playing Adelaide in Adelaide.
Yeah, well, the Crows will win, inevitably. And then we'll go back to the start of the cycle and the Western Bulldogs will be premiership favourites again. We should just settle down.
What do you want us to talk about?
Well, not that. Talk about which games you left early. I just think that this year it's the most unpredictable year I think we've had in a long time.
I'm going to give my premiership favourite ongoing every week on this show for the rest of the season.
New segment.
Thanks for that.
Cal, which footballers don't suit their numbers?
That's what we should be talking about.
I'm going to put my hand up and say no disrespect is meant in the following comments. But I was watching the Swans and Port Adelaide clash on Saturday. It was a great game. It struck me that Caden Brand was wearing number 2 for Sydney and it didn't quite fit. He previously wore number 30 at the Hawks.
Yeah.
And I think that's more in line with his range as a player. I think he's a 30 and above operator. Number 2 for me feels like it should be reserved for an early draft pick coming in, or an
one of your mates, the early draft picks,
or an up and coming player who's done his time in the late 30s and wants to move up and is due an upgrade. So Brand came as a delisted free agent, of course. Again, no disrespect to him. I'm just not sure that number 2 was the right fit for him.
Yep, completely agree. Riley Thilthorpe, didn't think he was a number 7. That's a midfielder's number. Number 7. And Riley Thilthorpe's going to have a fantastic career. Told us on Draft Night Countdown last year that he wanted to become a midfielder. Maybe he does, but you start in your career as a key forward. I'd start with the 18s or the 23s for a key forward. Same with Joe Danaher. Number 3, it's a midfielder's number.
Yeah.
You can't be doing that.
The 6 feels a bit right. We had at Essendon.
Yeah, and this brings me to an interesting point. I was watching on Saturday night. I was at the MCG. I got to admit, I didn't think initially when he arrived at the club that Luke Jackson was a number 6. But he's grown into that number. It makes sense now,
Works.
I think.
Yeah.
This is going to be a great one to hit us up on AFL Exchange, Instagram and Twitter. Who doesn't suit their number?
Paddy Ryder's 18 feels a bit like, I don't know, feels like he should be lower at St Kilda. Zach Smith's 32. He was at 2 at Gold Coast originally, 9 at Geelong. The 32 just doesn't feel right just watching him. Mm-hmm. And I saw in the flesh yesterday, Paul Seedsman, for the first time this year, he and Chase Jones sitting on the bench. I had to do a double take as to who was wearing the 1.
It's iconic, that 11. So can we get Paul Seedsman on to talk about his number?
Yeah, we might have to. We've got Max Gawn on to talk about his number 11, so maybe the seed is up next. All right, you are listening to AFL Exchange. We've got plenty of feedback over the last couple of weeks. This is an extraordinary comment that I want to read in full because I think it deserves to be read in full.
Oh, no, not the next one.
Last week, the revelation was made that Mitch Cleary doesn't drink water out of glasses. He drinks them purely out of water bottles, the bottles they come in, anything else, cans, but doesn't drink them out
Mitch
of glasses.
Franklin, they're calling it.
We got a message from a former...
I'm more a Frantel guy.
We got a message from a Scott who used to be a Mitch Cleary housemate back in the day.
Big listener.
He writes, thank you for this, Scotty, because this was enlightening. When I used to live with Mitch, one of the first nights we lived together, I cooked dinner like a good housemate does, and he offered to do the dishes.
Also a good housemate.
10 minutes later, I look over and I see the horror that has unfolded. What can only be described as a bubble bath in the kitchen sink. Bubbles and soap all over the already clean dishes that had been left to dry in the rack. I explained to him that you need to rinse dishes after washing or else the soap will stick to everything and dry that way. No wonder he tastes detergent every time he drinks water from a glass.
That is 100% true, that story.
Well, we'll have our moments.
Changed my dishwashing experience for life, that. I come from a dishwasher previously.
Yeah, I've never lived without a dishwasher. One from Nathaniel. Former Fremantle forward Josh Mellington has kicked 4 10-goal hauls in 8 games for Violet Town Football Club this year. Now, Violet Town is also the home of Killing Heidi. You would have been a big fan of Killing Heidi back in the day, Mitch. Jack Collister. Oh, one of you guys can do this one.
Wants to tell his I Spy story. He saw Cal at a Noel Gallagher U2 gig and said Cal was wearing a bucket hat and said that he thought that it was the equivalent of wearing a footy jumper to a game, wearing a bucket hat to a Noel Gallagher gig.
When are you too old to wear a bucket hat?
Yeah. He also said he was going to ask Cal for a photo, but he had the swagger going and looked like he was in his zone.
It's about the last gig I went to.
Great gig.
Went to Twitter just before. No, one of my mates just texted me. Eddie says, my old man, just some live feedback. Old man made him and his mate leave a Hawks v Carlton game at the G, probably around 2001. He said, if Sauce kicks this goal, we're leaving. Sauce missed it and still made us leave. Tico kicked the goal after the siren.
I was at that game. You know, I reckon that's the first and certainly not the last time I've cried at a game.
A couple of times this year. Yeah. Sam sent in a video. I don't know you could do this. I have an old iPhone though. He has sent in he basically screenshotted his screen.
Screen record.
His home screen, though. His home screen.
Yeah, no, they were doing them back in 2019, mate.
No, I get that. But can you make a video your background? Because Sam's video on his background of his phone was Hosk signaling the goal. It's just on repeat. Like,
no,
Hosk,
I apologise. I didn't know you can do that.
Hosk. So that was one. Hosk.
It's extraordinary. Fair few questions about Jaden Stevenson getting changed out of his long sleeves at quarter time.
And one last one. Now, Brett Ratton, we've been lifting the spirits at St Kilda, and I think we played a part in them winning last week. Can we just quickly get this audio? Because, again, he's mixed up Mitch and I.
I enjoy having fun. Footy is a serious game, and trying to get the balance of life is critical to make sure that we can have a laugh. Even with Cal, I had just a laugh before, but...
I'm going to start calling him Ben or Brent.
Yes.
I'm the barometer at the Saints.
Actually, can you do that? Shut up. The beast. Can you do that this week at the next press conference? Can you name drop him the wrong name?
Yeah.
Just see if he gets it.
Okay.
Challenge.
Done.
Just one last one. My dad's just texted me. I left early from the Malcolm Blight game. He was walking out of the ground singing da 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 as he lined up from 70. All right. Thank you for joining us. AFL Exchange, Instagram and Twitter. We'll see you 6:10 next week.